Hey campers, welcome to Nose Creek. This is Nose Creek in Calgary. It's one of our more important creeks. It feeds into the Bow River and it actually starts just north of Calgary in Airdrie and flows all the way down through here to the Bow River. And it's really important because it forms all sorts of wetlands. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about why fish, where they live and the insects that they eat and all of that are important, and just like Jesus's invitation that everyone gets to come, why everything that we see and don't see in the environment is really important. Okay, so still here beside our creek, and I have in front of me this lovely little box, but really what this box shows is not even all of the animals and birds and insects and plants that are important to fish, believe it or not. And all of these little pieces of rope that you see show why everybody in what we call an ecosystem, or where animals live and plants live, they live together, are important. Just like Jesus's invitation, Jesus invites everyone to his party, because really we need everyone to work better, to work together, and to work with all of the connections that God made us work. Well, his environment works the same way. So you're going fishing tomorrow. You're going to make some fishing rods today, from what I understand. So these are trout. This is our brown trout and a rainbow trout, and they're in my Bow River. And they, believe it or not, are connected to everything on here. So they are actually connected to algae. This is, we would probably call it pond scum, but it's actually a green algae that lives naturally in the river. And it's really important. A lot of people don't like it because it can be stinky. It's very slippery and slimy. If there's too much of it, it means you can't go swimming or use the water. But in its normal small amounts, it's really, really important, because if you follow this line, these guys, which are stoneflies, and these guys, which are caddis flies, and the other insect, wherever it is here, mayflies, when they're small, like in the baby form, which we call nymphs, they actually eat this stuff. They will also eat the pond leaves here. They'll also sometimes eat the different kinds of pond weed, which is really important, because as they get bigger and turn into flies, they then become food for things like our chorus frogs. Now look at how tiny this guy is. These are the guys that you see by the streams and wetlands in Calgary all the time. And he's so tiny, they're typically only that big. And they feed on these guys. But they're also fed by the ducks, like the ducks eat them. So this is what we call a food chain, pond scum to stonefly to chorus frog to a duck. That's a food chain, but all of these different connections make a food web. And at the bottom, or the beginning of all of that, are our plants. And these are aquatic plants that live naturally in Calgary. As I mentioned, the pondweed, the pond leaves, the algae. Even these plants here, this is a picture of birch, and we're going to learn a little bit more about birch tomorrow. They grow, and all of the green leaves, that's how they make their food for them. And then the first level, we call them consumers in science, come along and eat them. And so those are like the insects when they're small in their nymph form. When they become adults, insects actually don't eat a whole lot as adults, because their whole job is to make more eggs to have more little insects, but they will also eat some of the plants. These guys are also really important because all plants and animals die eventually. And if nothing ever got rid of all of that dead stuff, it would just pile up and everything would be polluted. So these guys, in their little forms, in their baby forms, in their larvae, and their nymph forms, actually eat all that dead stuff as well, which is really, really important, because it kind of takes that plant material and sometimes the dead fish scales and frog scales or whatever, and turns it back into dirt that the earth can use for plants, like the plants can use again. So that's really cool. And then they also provide, and I don't have all my connections yet because I want you guys to create some of these connections. It's going to be part of your activity. They also provide habitat or homes for our fish because it's been really, really hot lately, and fish and insects and other animals, especially if they're really small, can't handle big temperature change. So a place like this where I'm sitting right now is kind of shaded, and so the fish will actually hide in the shade, and they'll hide in the shade made by trees, they'll hide in the shade made by pondweed and the pond leaves. Not so much the algae, but they'll eat the algae off the rocks, which is important. So fish will eat plants, but fish will also eat small frogs or other fish. Fish and frogs of all kinds essentially will eat anything that fits in their mouth. So if I have a frog that's this big and a frog that's this big, the little frog is lunch. It's just the way frogs and fish work. So we also have all of these other frogs. Look at all, these are all found in Calgary, by the way. All of these animals can be found in Calgary. Pelicans live on the river, and pelicans will eat just about any animal on here. They'll eat the toads, they'll eat the trout, they'll eat the wood frogs, they'll eat the leopard frogs, they'll eat the little frogs, they'll also eat bugs. The ducks will eat the tiny frogs and bugs. These guys are salamanders, and they actually only eat plants, so they're really important. But the salamanders and this leopard frog back here are really important because if they start disappearing from the water systems where our fish live in Calgary, that means our systems are really, really poor and they're slowly dying. So we want to make sure that our environments are always healthy enough for leopard frogs and tiger salamanders, because if they start disappearing, then that means we have a real serious problem with our water. So that's important. And then we also have beavers, and you can see lots of evidence of beavers. And they actually, as much as they have huge teeth, they only eat plants. So they eat the bark, as much as they use the trees to make dams. They eat the bark and they eat the wood inside. They eat the pond leaf. They'll eat the pond weed. And then you have these guys at the back here. This is an osprey. You'll see these flying around. It's a bird of prey. It will come and dive, and it will eat the trout. It'll eat frogs. Doesn't typically spend its time on tiny things. It likes bigger things. So the bigger frogs, the bigger fish, it'll even eat mice, that kind of thing. And I don't even have any of those. These are just things that need to live near water. So these are all of our important water things. So when you're camping and fishing this week, and you're talking about the importance of water, all of these things need to live near water. And then, of course, we have our grizzly bear at the back, and he will eat pretty much anything on this, whether it's alive or dead, actually, which is another important job. We do need animals and things to eat other dead animals and things, so that, again, all of those nutrients, minerals, vitamins that we get from our food go back into the earth so that we can grow more food. So he's kind of really what you call a top predator. And again, if they start disappearing, that's really bad. That means everything that they eat, which is everything on here, is unhealthy. And so we want to make sure that our top predators are happy. And then what we call our keystone species are important. And they're always amphibians because they're always talking about water. So our froggies and our salamanders, they're always really important. And just like I was saying at the beginning, when Jesus invites everyone, we need everyone to come to this party for our creation to live the way God intended it to live. So when you're out playing in the water and enjoying the water and the heat, remember that these flies and the fish and the salamanders and the frogs and the pelicans, they live in the water. So it's okay for us to play in it, but we do need to be careful to not destroy it or make it worse than it is. So we can't, like, really throwing rocks is a bad idea, as fun as that is, because it disturbs the fish. And we don't want to pull up the weeds, all of them, because they need that to hide. So as you're learning about fish and insects and camping, we also have to remember that we need to be good caretakers or stewards of God's creation. And so back in your classroom with Jacqueline and your other leaders, you're going to try and finish creating all of these connections and then see what happens if even one of them breaks and you start seeing how the web will slowly fall apart.
I've counted up the cost.